This can't be happening. This can't be happening, Kate Harper thought wildly, casting her eyes from side to side as the group she was in, all chained and as naked as she, were led into a massive open-air room that could only be described as an arena. A roaring crowd made her ears ring, and she winced, wanting to squeeze her eyes shut to block everything out, to wake up from this freaking nightmare. Because she was just going to come out with what she knew was undeniably true. Aliens. There. She'd said it. At first, when Kate had woken up in the dimly lit room with shaking walls of metal, and to the weeping, hysterical cries of women she'd never even seen before, she thought she'd been kidnapped by sex traffickers straight out of her bed, because turning in for the night after watching an episode of The Walking Dead was the last thing she remembered. Except her sex traffickers weren't even human. They had scaled green and brown swirled skin, the eyes of lizards, and the mouth of... She shuddered. She didn't even know. They were hideously ugly, even more hideous than the zombies she'd been watching just hours earlier. So, at first, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. Then she just never woke up from her dream. It got worse. She'd watched in horror as the aliens took the women out of their cages one by one and stripped them naked, chaining their hands in shackles the color of brushed steel and attaching them together in a single line. She was one of the last women. She could still remember the feel of their cold talons on her flesh as her clothes fell to the floor, her teddy bear pajama shorts she'd had for years and her worn college alumni shirt, and the way their scales looked almost wet and slimy underneath the harsh lighting. Shortly after they'd all been lined up, the whole room shook and vibrated, a loud booming sound and a mechanical whirring reaching her ears. It was then she realized they were on a ship. A freaking spaceship. Kate had never been one to flip out. She had a very matter-of-fact attitude about her, one that had served her well over the years. So she didn't weep or cry out or beg as the line of naked women was led from the ship and straight into a long, dark tunnel. She could hear the noise, the chanting voices getting louder and louder. It was hot in the tunnel, almost unbearably so. Sweat broke out over her body, and she tried to curl in on herself to shield her naked breasts. They jiggled with every step, as did her thighs and tummy. She wasn't stick-thin like some of the other women. She was one of the curvier among them, which led her to realize that there was no discernible pattern among the women the aliens had captured, except that they were all relatively young, in their 20s. They were all different ethnicities, all different body types. Some were crying. Others were blankly staring in front of them, as though on autopilot. A few, like herself, were looking around, probably searching for a method of escape. One of their captors led the chain at the front, and she realized that he had a long tail like an iguana that hovered just above the ground as he walked. They passed another alien, and the one in the front spoke to him, a series of hissing, throaty sounds that she knew no human could ever hope to replicate. Chills broke out over her body despite the heat. A few moments later, they were led into the arena. It was a massive structure made out of stone. She'd never been to Rome, but she'd seen the Colosseum in photos, and this place reminded her of it. Except they weren't in Rome. Not by a long shot. Automatically, she brought her hand up to shield her eyes from the glaring light, her chains jingling. The top of the Colosseum-like arena was open, and her eyes widened when she spotted 2 suns. The bright stars were steadily sinking into the horizon, casting an intense golden glow over finely ground red rock, followed by deep shadows from the stone pillars of the structure that jutted up towards the reddening sky. A cumulative cry erupted from the women as they were led onto the rock, and a few moments later, Kate realized why. The rock was hot. Tears stung her eyes as her bare feet made contact. She hopped from one foot to another, the soles of her feet starting to blister. The alien leading the chained women made a harsh sound and slapped the girl at the front of the line across the face, whipping her head to the side. The woman whimpered. Most went silent, but the crowd only grew louder.